Well, we're honored today to have Laura's story with
Oh,
us. And Laura, thank you for taking this time out of your schedule, this busy time to come by and be with us. And so it's really, really
thank
nice.
you so much for having me.
Well, for those who may not know, Laura is a songwriter and a singer, worship leader at Perimeter Church, an author of how many books now?
Gracious, I think 3.
3 books. That's awesome. And a graduate of Columbia International University,
Yes.
where my dad went when it was Columbia Bible
Bible,
College.
I had just, it had just changed over
Did
when
it
I
really?
started.
Okay.
Yes. And so no one knew. I would say, oh, I go to Columbia, and they're like, what's that?
Right.
It is interesting that I graduated from a school that's known for equipping missionaries.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that is what I am.
Right.
I'm traveling different places. It looks really different than a lot of my friends
Right.
who went to India and living in huts and things like that. And so it's all about opening your hands and saying, God, send me wherever. And not there may be more seasons where I'm not doing the same kind of
But
ministry.
being rooted in a local church and a community is
Yes.
huge. And I love your emphasis
absolutely.
there. Right. Yeah. That's good.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what a blessing. I was talking to my wife last night, and she said it was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And we were going through kind of a struggle with one of our children. And her sister had given Jeannie your book,
Oh.
When God Doesn't Fix It. And so Jeannie happened to be in Walmart, and she got a phone call, and it was from one of our children, and it letting us know something that was pretty devastating to us, and something that was completely opposite of what she had been praying.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
Oh,
when that
man.
happened, she had her groceries there, and she walked out of Walmart, leaving her groceries, hopped into it was at Travelers Rest Walmart, hopped into the car, went over to Furman University, picked up on the Kindle your book, When God Doesn't Fix It.
Wow.
And she said she's probably, of any book that she's ever recommended, would be this book here. And she said, and God
Golly.
still hasn't fixed it yet. But so I just wanted to let you know what a blessing and encouragement. And so
Excellent.
your platform and influence goes way beyond what you will ever know until one day you kind of get to heaven. But it's been a blessing in our family's life. So that was, and also just want to ask you, Spread Truth Ministries has been going to New York City for 30 years almost, doing short-term mission trips. And I heard you on an interview say the impact that a short-term mission trip had on your life. And I just wanted you to kind of share that, because it might be an encouragement to those who are listening. Say, listen, maybe I need to go sometime.
Well, absolutely. I think that one of the reasons why I even do what I do is because of a work that the Lord started in my heart on a mission trip. And kind of the short story is I was, my freshman year of college, I'd been raised in the church, and that freshman year of college, trying to figure out, do I believe these things that my parents raised me to believe? And every kid has to have that moment of stepping away and looking at their faith to decide to make it their own. And that's kind of what I was walking through, and choosing, making terrible choices, making terrible choices, and really finding the scriptures to be true. Like the road, that other road was leading to destruction and hopelessness. And a friend of mine invited me to a church, and it was a campus meeting that night. And at the campus meeting, they invited kids to sign up for this mission trip to Mongolia.
Oh my.
And I didn't even know where Mongolia was. I ended up, my friends were like, oh, let's do this. Would be amazing to do this summer. And so we all signed up, and then every single one of them dropped out, and it was just me. But I had, again, I was going through such a weird time spiritually of figuring out, is any of this true?
Right.
That I thought, I really don't know what else I would do with my summer. How about I'll do this? And even the leader of the trip told me later. Actually, no, he told me before the trip. He said, I'm reading your application. I'm not sure. He said, there's no good reason for me to take you to another country to share the gospel when I'm not entirely sure you understand it yourself. He said, the only reason, he said, every time I try to put your application in the no pile, God stops me.
Wow.
And so he even told me at the front end how reluctant he was. But God did a tremendous work in my life. And we were in outer Mongolia. We were showing the Jesus film to nomads, people who had never heard the gospel before. And so I'm watching, we would drive up we were living in tents.
Yeah.
We were cooking lamb over a fire. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I had rarely been anywhere else, outside of South Carolina. It was a very different experience for me. But we were showing, we would hang a sheet up and show the Jesus film with this projector on, run by this generator. And so probably 2 or 3 times a day, we'd go visit these different tents. And so I'm watching the story of Jesus. I'm watching over and over again in a different language.
Yeah.
Watching the story of the gospel, and I'm watching how they're responding to it. And it just opened my heart. It was that story I'd heard my whole life.
Yeah.
But I remember by the end of the trip, realizing that there's nothing more important in life than that story.
Right. Yeah.
And I had been invited to be part of that story. That Jesus had died on the cross for my sin.
Yeah.
That I might have a relationship with God and spend eternity with him in heaven. And all the other things I'd been chasing in life, trying to find meaning,
Right.
trying to find security and acceptance, had, first of all, it was all futile. But secondly, I had been invited to be part of the greatest adventure there's ever been.
Yeah.
To know God and to tell others about him. So yeah, for me, that mission trip was
huge.
just integral in my faith. And yeah, I'm
You would
always
encourage people to go there.
Oh my gracious! It really, and it's weird. Are they summer?
Yeah, summer. Yeah.
It's hard sometimes because as a student, you're thinking, oh, I should do this internship. Oh, I should do this thing to get me ahead. Well, the truth is if you don't know where you're going anyway, it doesn't really help to get ahead.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And it was a trip that changed the whole trajectory of my life. I think it's Francis Chan. He says, people are concerned about climbing the ladder and making sure they're getting as high on the ladder. He said the greater concern should be getting to the top of the ladder and realizing that this whole time you put it against the wrong wind.
Wow. Yeah.
And I feel like that's sometimes what short-term missions can do, where you go and you experience God at work other places and you realize, this is what I want my life to be about.
Sometimes when you get out of the normal routine, God has a chance to kind of to speak into your heart.
Oh, he literally took me to outer Mongolia.
Oh, did you be able to?
Yes. I'll never forget being on that plane on the way back. And the leader of the trip, the guy that, a guy named Adrian Dupree, who almost didn't take me, he looks over at me and he says, all right, so what's next? And I'm sure he was asking when do you start school or what else are you doing this summer? He goes, what's next? And I said, I truly have no idea. My life has been so turned upside down. I have and he said, well, good thing we have about 16 hours to figure got about a 16-hour flight to figure this out. So,
well, listen, I don't want to keep you much longer, but just 2 things. One, here at Spread Truth, our goal is to be able to proclaim the gospel in the context of the big story of Scripture, as we're able to kind of share with people kind of the plot line of how everything started, what's gone wrong in the world, is there any hope, and what does the future hold, the meta-narrative.
Great.
And I know that you have a story of brokenness that maybe some of the listeners don't know about, but how have you, first of all, maybe share a little bit of that story, and how has that been able for you to be able to proclaim the good news of Christ because of what you got? Because you said, I think, in an interview or somebody, that you can thrive and limp at the same time, and maybe you could expound on that too. So that was very, very good.
Well, the book When God Doesn't Fix It tells about just the story of thriving and limping that our family has walked. So my husband and I have been married it'll be 20 years in May.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But within the first 2 years of our marriage, Mark was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And that is very different than what someone expects as a newlywed. and he had brain surgery, and we thought he was going to be in the hospital for about a week. Ended up being in the hospital for 3 months. Had complications, had additional procedures. And when he finally left, I remember saying to the doctor, like, I'm glad we're being discharged. And honestly, at that point, there were days we didn't know whether he would make it at all. So I was so thankful, that the Lord had spared his life. But I remember saying to the doctor, I don't understand why we're leaving, because he's not better yet.
Yeah.
And that's when the doctor began to talk to me about kind of a phrase that we use these days as the new normal. And a lot of post-COVID, a lot of people are familiar with having to come up with a new normal. But for us, disability became part of our story, became part of our marriage. And then after 8 years of praying through whether to have kids, now we have 4 little kids.
Yes.
And it's very much, disability is part of our family.
Yeah.
There's a lot of limitations.
Sure.
There's even a lot of grief still associated with all of it, that our family does look different. Martin's opportunities are different because he has a short-term memory deficit and a vision deficit, so he's unable to drive, he's unable to work full-time. There's a lot of basic tasks.
Things you have to deal with every single day.
Exactly.
In other people's lives, they know about it, their life kind of goes on,
Yeah.
but you have to deal with these things really on an everyday basis.
Well, what it's caused us to do, honestly, is to reevaluate, like, what does it mean when Jesus says, I came that you might have life and have life abundantly?
Yeah.
A lot of times we have our own picture of what that means. We're going to have a great job, we're going to have perfect health and all of this. But in order for those promises to still be true in the midst of the brokenness, not just that happens in this world, but that sometimes, for whatever reason, God chooses to not heal or to not change, how do those two things come together?
Yeah.
And we don't understand all of it. We still have very hard days where we just have to pray that God would give us the faith for that day. But we truly have seen, like the psalmist says, the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. We have seen God's good hand doing good things in our lives, even though things still remain pretty broken.
Sure. Well, Johnny Erickson taught, I think I read a quote. She says, God doesn't promise to heal us, but he has promised to hold us.
Well, Johnny she's a friend and she's a hero of ours. And another thing that she says that we cling to often is that God often uses that which we hate. God uses that which he hates to accomplish that which he loves.
That's awesome.
The brokenness, so not to get too preachy here, but when you think about this idea of brokenness, as a believer, like, how do we make sense of this? Well, what the Bible teaches, 2 very clear places where the Bible talks about sin and brokenness. One is Romans 5. Through the fall, sin entered the world, and brokenness and that's infertility, that's brain tumor, that's addiction, all of that. And so we live, pre-heaven.
Yeah.
Outside of heaven, we live with brokenness, and that's reality. But that's not all that the Bible says about it. We have Romans 5, but we also have John 9, where this man is born blind. The disciples who were always, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out who to blame, was it his fault or was it his parents' fault that he was born blind? But Jesus' response is he was born blind that the works of God might be displayed. We don't always understand why God heals in one situation and does in another.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, in our life, in our family, it's been hard, but we truly have seen the glory of God displayed through the brokenness that is disability.
Wow. Well, great. Well, listen, one last thing before you go. What is coming up, or maybe if you would like to say, listen, I'm really excited about this. I don't know if it's a new project or maybe your latest book or a new song. What is something you'd like to tell us and say, listen, that you're really excited about that's maybe on the horizon?
Oh, on the horizon. So I'm about to start working on a book on worship. And so, but I'm not going to tell you about that because I literally haven't even started. I put the proposal together. I'm talking with the publishing company, but that's about it. I haven't actually put pen to paper yet. But maybe the thing I'm most excited about, we're here at the Sing Conference with the Gettys, and we have a new song that we're doing here called Come Unto Jesus.
Oh, really?
It's just a call. I feel like the song if I had to give you a picture of the song, it's just Jesus' arms wide open. And it's neat. It's neat here. There's a lot of ministry leaders that come to this conference they're looking for like new music to share with their churches. But really what they need is the arms of Jesus saying, hey, come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. So I'm hoping that that'll be the message that people hear with the song.
Well, you've been a gift to the kingdom of God. The
Oh,
art
you're
form of
kind.
being able to write songs and write books have brought deep theological truths kind of down on the level where the average person can understand. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your
You're
love and
kind.
impact on
Well, as a songwriter, I often say that when we write songs, it's not so much the truths that we've mastered, as much as the promises of God found in the scriptures that God very generously gives to us songwriters, because he knows that we need to sing those truths night after night in order to believe them all the more. So,
listen, thank you so
thanks
much.
again.
It's been wonderful to have you. It's been great.